Hello everyone and welcome back, sooner than anticipated, to Feminist Friday, where today we'll be discussing one of my favourite books from my teenage years, D.U.F.F, or The Designated Ugly Fat Friend by Cody Keplinger. And we will also be discussing the unfortunate adaptation, talking about the ways that the adaptation skewed the messages that the book was trying to portray, and why I wasn't fucking happy about it. Whether the book or the film is the superior piece of feminist media. I think you can probably all already guess which one I'm going to say, but we're going to continue on with this anyway. The book is about a girl called Bianca who is introduced to the concept of the designated ugly fat friend, and she lets it overtake her brain. She lets it start affecting her decisions and the way that she acts in life, the way that she sees her friends, and by the end she learns a very important feminist moral lesson. I read this book when I was around maybe 14 to 16. The main character in the book is 17, she's still in high school, and an interesting fact about this book is that the author herself was 17 when she wrote it. Cody Keplinger did an excellent job, especially for a girl of her age. She really spoke to me personally when I was younger, and she really got across a lot of these feminist ideas to me in a way that I could really relate and understand, maybe in a way that an adult writer could not. When I found out that the book was going to be turned into a film, I was really chuffed, because Bianca, the main character of the book, was one of my idols in my younger years, and so I went to watch the D.U.F.F and I was disgusted because it was essentially just a fan fiction of the book that I had so loved. The only thing that seemed to be the same was the character names, and all of the messages had been completely skewed. So I thought today I would go over the changes, just pick it apart entirely and see what fucking happens. I don't know. We're going to talk about the book first and then we'll talk about the adaptation later, because otherwise my galaxy brain cannot handle it. The book, as I've said, centres around Bianca. Bianca is smart, a little bit cynical. She's not really down with dancing around the clubs, boys, like all of her friends are. But apart from this, she's mostly just your average girl. And I think it is important that Bianca is a very average kind of every woman, because it's important that most girls reading this will be able to relate themselves to her in some way. It's important that she not be too nerdy or too popular. She kind of has to be an in-betweener in order for her to fit into this message that we're going to be exploring later on, okay? Bianca has two best friends. They're called Casey and Jessica. The friendship between Bianca, Casey and Jessica is very important to the story. Bianca learns about this D.U.F.F concept, which I'll explain to you in a minute if you're not familiar. It makes her question the relationships that she has with her friends. It makes her question the way that she is seen when she is with her friends. It makes her question maybe even the way that her friends see her. Over the course of the book, this friendship between the three girls is a really important theme. I love that. You know that I love a book that teaches girls how important their teenage female friendships are. So much more important than any relationship they might have with a man. Bianca takes her friends to this under 18s disco that they like to go to. She doesn't like to go, but she takes them because she likes to see them have fun. She doesn't want to be a party pooper. And while she's there, she comes across this like popular guy from their class called Wesley, and he tries to strike up a conversation with her. Bianca doesn't like Wesley very much. She calls him like a man whore, essentially. He's a guy who likes to sleep around, okay? And it's not like he's hiding it from anyone. It's not like he's like cheating on anyone. Bianca doesn't approve of this promiscuous behaviour from him, okay? She doesn't approve of promiscuous behaviour from anyone. She's a little bit slut-shamey, but then again, she's a teenage girl. We have to forgive her. Bianca doesn't want anything to do with Wesley, and so she kind of tells him to piss off, and he says, like, help a guy out. I'm trying to talk to the D.U.F.F so that her hot friends will speak to me. Bianca's like, what the fuck is the D.U.F.F? Wesley explains that D.U.F.F stands for Designated Ugly Fat Friend. Essentially, the concept is that in every group of people there is one person who is less attractive than the others, and it's not to say that that one person is like hideously ugly and everybody else is alright. It's just that on like a sliding scale, I guess, this person is the least attractive person in the group. According to Wesley, in order to impress pretty girls, you have to be nice to the D.U.F.F, and that is why Wesley is speaking to Bianca. Obviously, Bianca is very offended. She throws a drink in his face, as probably would I. Us, as the audience, know that Wesley was chatting shit and that it was just a really rude and mean thing to say. And Bianca, on some level, does know this as well, but she lets this concept and this idea overtake her, probably because she's always had a little bit of insecurity about herself and her looks anyway. There's some other stuff going on in Bianca's life as well that is causing her a lot of stress, like her parents are getting a divorce and her ex-boyfriend is back in town. Her ex-boyfriend is a secret because it's her new best friend's older brother, and she doesn't know that they were ever in a relationship. In order to avoid all this stress that's going on in her life, Bianca somehow ends up in a sexual relationship with Wesley, who so insulted her at the club the other night. I guess her reasoning is that he'll sleep with anyone and she needs the distraction. This all plays into some of the other themes that go on throughout the book. For example, Bianca is somebody who bottles up all of her emotions, runs away from hard things, and she runs away to Wesley to avoid all these difficult and stressful situations that are going on in her life instead of talking to her friends about it. By the end of the book, she learns that that's not healthy, and she also learns that avoiding our problems through sex with kind of strangers, that's not really that good either. A big part of this theme of running away is Bianca's mum, who's been traipsing around all over the country doing self-help speeches instead of being at home and trying to work through the problems that she's having with Bianca's dad. It's by looking at her mum and that behaviour that Bianca eventually does learn to stop running away from her problems. The ex-boyfriend thing, it's not really explored in a lot of depth, but I feel like the things that are said are really important. This boy was a lot older than her, and he used that to his advantage to get sexual favours from her that she didn't really understand, that she thought was this special thing between them because they were in love, that she'd never done with anybody else before. Turned out that this guy already had a girlfriend who was his own age, and he was just, you know, taking advantage of this younger girl. It's very important that young girls are aware that some boys might try to do this, and maybe just to avoid age gap relationships altogether. Also an important message here about opening up after trauma. Not just the stuff about her ex-boyfriend, but about the divorce stuff that's going on now. Bianca chooses not to open up to her friends, and it creates a big gap between them. They actually end up having a fight. At the end of the book, you realise that if Bianca had just sat down and talked to her friends about it from the beginning, or maybe even sat down and talked to her parents about the divorce from the beginning, then none of the catastrophic stuff that happens toward the end of the book would happen. So let's talk about Wesley as a love interest. He's obviously the guy who called Bianca the D.U.F.F in the first place, which doesn't warm us to him immediately. But he's then got that, you know, that softer, smarter side to him that the cynical main character can fall for eventually. He's a little bit of a cliche, but he's not at the same time. Like, he does have layers to him. I don't mind the fact that Wesley has sexual experience, especially because Bianca herself has obviously been with her ex-boyfriend Jake, and so she also has sexual experience. I think it is important that, like, not every teen book focuses around some virgin girl, because not every teen girl is a virgin. It's important to, like, spread the word that it's okay to sleep with more than one person, because if every book is just about them getting together with the love of their life and only sleeping with them forever, then people are going to think that that's the way that it works, and sometimes it's just not. Even though Wesley does sleep around a little bit, it's not like he's lying to everyone. He's perfectly honest about his extracurricular activities. The girls who sleep with him know what they're getting themselves into, and so even though you might think he's an arsehole, at least he's an honest arsehole. That's what allows him to get, like, a redemption at the end, is that he wasn't, like, sneaking around hurting girls' feelings. He just wasn't necessarily exploring his own feelings. And so I think that makes us feel a little bit sorry for Wesley, especially when you discover his backstory a little bit later on. It might be hard for you to imagine us forgiving Wesley after him saying something so massively misogynistic in the first chapter, but let me get to it. Bianca can be a little bit slut-shamey, not just to Wesley, but to the girls that he, you know, frequently hangs about with, some of which are in her own friend group, and she makes, you know, some untoward comments about them. I don't mind a little bit of slut-shaming in teen books. I think that it's just realistic. I think that as long as some character acknowledges that that's not something they should really be saying, and that it is, in fact, very sexist and slut-shamey, I think that you're allowed to lampshade yourself a little bit on that. It's called cognitive dissonance, and if teenage girls don't have it in spades, then who does? Bianca actually goes on to say at the end of the book that calling her friends words like slut and hoe are just the same as Wesley turning around and calling her the D.U.F.F. They're all just words to describe physical appearance that don't really mean anything and are used as a way to gain power over people. It's all pickup artist bullshit. That is the lesson that we are learning in today's book, and I absolutely love that. The book's really sex positive in other ways, like Bianca and Wesley enter into a purely physical relationship. There's not any feelings between them in the beginning. It's purely Bianca using Wesley to get away from her home situation, which of course is not healthy. Like, apart from that, their relationship with each other and the way that they treat each other is generally respectful. And, you know, Wesley especially, he wouldn't expect him to be, but he is. He says some dickish things sometimes, like he's like, oh, I'm not going to deny you the pleasure of sharing a bed with me, and like he's cocky and stuff, but he is generally very nice to Bianca, and I think he does start to see their antagonistic nature towards each other as a little bit of a joke before Bianca does. Bianca is using this relationship to run away from her problems, and running away from your problems is never healthy, especially using sex as a way to do that, okay? That is not something that this book is teaching younger girls. That is something that is rectified by the end. And even though Bianca and Wesley do end up together, Bianca actually turns around to Wesley and says, we're going to take it slow this time. You know, we're not going to start sleeping together again straight away. And I like that. I like the revoked consent, bro. I like that that's something we're teaching young women that they can do. That just because you've slept with somebody once doesn't mean that your situation can't change and you can't like rescind that comfortableness, because that is something you can do. So Bianca really lets this D.U.F.F comment go to heart. She starts to think of herself as the D.U.F.F all the time. She starts to really compare herself hard to her friends. She starts to kind of resent her friends in a way, just for, I guess, being prettier than her, in her opinion, and for maybe possibly using the fact that they are prettier than her to their advantage. She also like finds herself looking around at the groups around her and trying to figure out who the D.U.F.F is in the different groups. She just lets this narrative that Wesley has spun her completely take over her life. It's a really realistic portrayal of how like the tiniest little comments about your appearance can hurt and can really affect you for some time. It's really personally interesting to me, right? Because it's like, it's about how if you continue to consume these narratives and continue to like humor them, they can just naturally become a part of your life. Something that I used to be really obsessed with, and I'm still quite interested in it now, is the whole like incel culture. I used to like devour that shit. I used to be on the forums every day. I used to watch videos about it all the time. Whenever it was in the news or there was a new documentary about it, I was there with popcorn and I was learning all of this stuff. And I found that after a while of being so immersed in this world, I started to think like an incel, bro. Yeah, it was quite scary. I started to refer to everybody as Chads and Stacys, and I was talking about red pills and blue pills all the time. It was partly ironic, but I could feel their worldview kind of seeping into my brain, and I had to take a step back for a second and really kind of understand that not all men think like that, and that's not actually the way the world works. Just because you're sitting there consuming so much of this media or whatever, you can forget that the world is a big place full of diverse people who think differently. That's what Bianca's let Wesley do to her. He's like indoctrinated her into this D.U.F.F way of thinking, okay? I like the book because there's never a moment where you believe Wesley. The audience of the book knows the whole time that it's bullshit and that Bianca shouldn't be feeling that way. We see throughout the text that her two friends are jealous of Bianca for certain things, that they have their own hang-ups about their appearance, that they have days where they feel ugly. We see that Bianca observes several of her peers who she would consider the D.U.F.F getting off with boys more so than peers who she thinks are prettier than them, because everybody knows that the real charm, the real attractiveness is confidence. And we see these like subtle ideas be explored all the way through, just so that there's never a moment when the audience is convinced by Wesley. Even though Bianca is, and she's our main character, we know that Bianca's an idiot for letting him get under her skin. Now remember that point. That is so important. Like, that's such an important part of the book for me, is that we all are waiting for Bianca to realise that she and Wesley are wrong, and that's not the way the world works. Because when we start talking about the film, that's not the way it goes. We learn more about Wesley's backstory. He's had a bad home life, his parents are never around, and so he's very lonely. That's why he feels the need to surround himself with these women so that he doesn't have to spend nights alone all the time. His little sister, who he absolutely adores, is kind of being stolen away from him by his grandmother, who doesn't like approve of his lifestyle. You know how boys are in books. The more that their family thinks that they're a bad guy, the more they're going to act like one. So that's why Wesley kind of acts the way he does. It is an explanation, but it's never given as an excuse. And of course he does stop this behavior, and by the end of the book does enter into a sudden monogamous relationship with Bianca, even though he's expressed no interest in that before. And yeah, it is a little bit cliched, but I think the fact that Wesley always had that integrity and that honesty, the fact that he never like went around and actually like broke anybody's heart or anything like this, it really allowed us to feel like he learned from the situation. And he did apologize to Bianca as soon as he realized that his Duff comment had hurt her. And when she explained what she had learned about how the Duff concept was a load of pickup artist rubbish, Wesley agreed with her, because he's not an idiot. One more thing that you should know about the book is that there is a brief love triangle, which was the style at the time. It's a really good love triangle, I feel. Like, if you look at, like, Twilight or The Hunger Games, there's very clearly one victor who's going to end up with the girl at the end, right? And the other guy is just there to add a little bit of tension and drama. And nobody's really rooting for him who's seriously reading the book. In this, I feel like both love interests are equally appealing, because on the one side you have Wesley. They've done this whole enemies to lovers thing, which, you know, I love. He's charming and we've got to know him very well throughout the narrative, and obviously as a result we've all fallen for him. But the other guy is a guy that Bianca has had a crush on since before the book even started. She never thought that she'd have a chance with him. She finally gets the chance to speak to this guy, Toby. When she eventually falls out with Wesley and starts to date Toby, we see this as Bianca achieving something that she's wanted from the very beginning, and we're happy for her, right? And so it feels like she really is giving something up at the end when she eventually realizes that she's in love with Wesley and, you know, leaves Toby in the dust. And Toby's such a nice guy as well. Like, Toby just accepts that it's not something that's going to happen, and he's like, well, if you want to be with Wesley, then there's nothing I can do and you should go to it, bro. The fact that, like, Toby didn't do anything wrong as well, that also makes it like this big sacrifice for Bianca, because we know that, like, she's morally against the way that Wesley has been in the past, even if we know that he's probably going to change for her as a result of our happy ending. I just think it's something that it was done really well. Love triangles were so shite back in the day, and this 17-year-old just blew all you folks out the water, bro. So we're gonna move on to talking about the film. I want to talk to you about the film's first scene. In the first scene, Bianca and her friends are walking up the corridor in school, and the boys are talking about how hot Bianca's friends are. And then when they start talking about Bianca, they say, Bianca has the hottest friends. You can obviously see from this first scene that something has gone terribly wrong, okay? By the end of the book, Bianca realizes, okay, that everyone feels like the Duff. Everyone feels like the Duff sometimes. Everyone's got their insecurities. Everybody thinks that somebody else has got it better than them. Everybody's jealous of something. Like, I wish I had curly hair, you know what I mean? But loads of girls with curly hair talk to me about how they wish they had straight hair because curly hair is so hard to manage. This concept of the Duff is bullshit, because it's having confidence in yourself that makes you attractive. This first scene in the film very clearly establishes that it's not just Wesley who thinks in this stupid, skewed, sexist way. It's the entire school. The film makes Wesley right. That's my essential point here. The film makes Wesley right. There's a scene in the film when Bianca goes on the internet to look up what the Duff means, and I could accept if there was like a niche little group of guys on the internet who were like talking about being the Duff and stuff, but it's the fact that it's the whole school. The whole school actually calls Bianca the Duff. The film makes Bianca this awkward, ugly girl compared to her friends. The Duff is a real thing in the film, which just completely blows the concept of in the book out of the water, right? Another thing that annoys me about the film is that Wesley has friends. In the book, Wesley doesn't have friends because he doesn't want to be anybody else's Duff. He's scared of, like, not being the alpha Chad. Oh no! I did it. I turned into an incel. I did it. Wesley's scared of not being the alpha Chad, so he only has like one mate, and that mate is gay. So obviously they're not even going for the same people, so there's no competition there. That says something about Wesley, right? Because it's like, oh, even you are suffering because of the stupid way that you see the world. In the film, Wesley has friends. In fact, Wesley has a Duff. It blows my head off that somebody could have read this book and misunderstood it so badly that they actually thought that the Duff was a real thing. Huh? The annoying thing about the film is that Casey and Jessica are barely in it. They are characters, and like I said, they are walking down the corridor with Bianca at the beginning. Yet as soon as Bianca learns about the Duff concept, she falls out with Casey and Jessica and just starts hanging out with Wesley for the entire film, and the film focuses more on the budding romance between them and nothing about the friendship. At the end of the film, they get like a tiny little speech about how Bianca is the smart one. Not about how we all feel insecure sometimes and about how, oh, I'm jealous of the way that you look when you wear that fucking dress, even though you're jealous of my hair and I'm jealous of your eyes. Instead of that, her two friends turn around and they're like, oh yeah, we're pretty, but you're smart, so we've all got something, right? I understand what they were going for. I understand they were going for, oh, you don't have to be pretty, but there's not just not a lot of body positivity there, is there? It essentially feels like the film's turning around to me and going like, some of you guys are ugly and you're just gonna have to deal with that. There's a lot less feminism in the film just by a simple virtue of there being like no girl friendships in there, but then they had to go and add in a mean girl character for absolutely no reason. I think her name was Madison or something like that. They add her in to be antagonistic towards Bianca and to be a rival love interest with Wesley. Everything is just so cliche in this film, bro. It's not even funny. Bianca's big speech about how the D.U.F.F doesn't, that's supposed to be about how the D.U.F.F doesn't mean anything, is wasted on this mean girl at the end, even though it should have been this empowering moment between her and her friends. She uses it to kind of dunk on this other girl and basically call her a bitch, and it's like, well, that's not feminism. At the end, like, Bianca's been trying to write this paper the entire time about what, like, homecoming means to her or something, and she goes off on one about how being the D.U.F.F is like cool. The film tries to make it so it's like, oh, even if you're the D.U.F.F, you've got your own talents, and look how cool Bianca is, and she's the D.U.F.F, so you're cool too. I don't want to be the D.U.F.F, bro. Nobody wants to be the D.U.F.F. It's a really nasty word. It shouldn't be something that we should be saying to each other. We shouldn't be calling each other sluts and hoes and shit like that. Like, we shouldn't be calling each other nasty things, and we shouldn't be trying to reclaim nasty words. We should be sticking to the fucking source material and telling girls that, like, you just, like, be confident, bro. Like, you're gorgeous, you've got a body, it works. Go you. With that framing in mind, that the film completely fucking just fucks it up, bro, and makes the D.U.F.F into a real concept and makes Wesley right, and makes it about transforming Bianca into not the D.U.F.F, and they actually like give her a makeover and stuff, bro. It's completely ridiculous. With that framing in mind, let's look at some of the other changes and how they also made it not very feminist. So in the book, Bianca lives with her dad and she's helping him through the divorce. For some reason they swap this, and in the film they have her living with her mum, who's the self-help coach, who's already split up with her dad ages ago, and so she's barely in the film at all, and it feels like there was just really no point. It almost feels like it's not cool to have like a girl love her dad in a girly movie. Like, it felt like they wanted it to be a mum so there would be more of this feminist feeling, but because she was in it so little, it just didn't make any sense. And it just made me feel like they didn't want to see a vulnerable man in the movie. Like, they didn't want to see a guy turn to alcoholism like Bianca's dad does in the book after a divorce, and to like sink to such a low. So they just swapped him out for a woman. There is actually no alcoholism in the film because they were concentrating so hard on doing like makeover montages. They didn't have time to explore some of the more serious issues that the book did. There's no ex-boyfriend, so Bianca doesn't need a reason to withdraw, and so there's no lessons about not bottling up your feelings. Instead, they make Bianca a fucking kissless virgin. No representation for my non-virgin teenage girlies. And it reinforces the D.U.F.F stereotype, because in the book, Bianca had been in a relationship before, like somebody had found her attractive before, she'd had sex before. So it became this even more ridiculous thing. She was like, oh, no one's ever going to be attracted to me because I'm the D.U.F.F. And it's like, you've had a boyfriend before, Bianca, you're an idiot. But in the film, Bianca's never been with anyone because she's ugly and hideous and disgusting. That's not me saying that, by the way. That's what the film's trying to say. I don't like the fact that they made Wesley and Bianca childhood friends, because it felt like the only reason that Wesley was able to look past Bianca's duffiness and see the person on the inside to fall in love with her was because he had this prior bond with her. If Bianca was just some random ugly girl who'd just come to their school, there would have been no way that Wes would fall for a D.U.F.F. Made Wesley like dumb as well. That was something that really annoyed me, is they made him dumb even though in the book he was smart, and they made him a jock. So they just made him into this complete stereotype, when in the book he had a little bit of depth to him, like he was good at English and stuff like that. Wesley apologises to Bianca for calling her the D.U.F.F fucking like 20 minutes into the film or something stupid like that. It's like halfway through. Okay, so if we're not waiting till the end, then what is the point in this? Like, what are we actually saying? And it's because the filmmakers obviously realised that they'd made Wesley right, and so him apologising for calling her the D.U.F.F couldn't have been the end point, because she is the fucking D.U.F.F. The film has Wesley and Bianca be like friends, and they don't even kiss until the end of the film, I'm pretty sure. And so there's no like representation of different kinds of relationships. They don't want a friends with benefits relationship in their teen movie for some reason. Mate, teenagers are gonna explore the sexuality, bro. You can't fucking stop them. We need that representation in there to show them how to do it right. And Bianca and Wesley actually had kind of a healthy thing going there for a second. I just realised that Wesley, like, just straight up doesn't learn anything in this film because he's right. He was right the whole time. It's not like he learned that the D.U.F.F thing wasn't real. He just learned that, like, D.U.F.Fs are cool people, which is like, fuck off. The thing that annoyed me the most about the film when I first saw it was the characterization of Toby, which is the guy that Bianca fancied from the beginning. Something that Bianca really likes about Toby in the book is that he's smart and political and a little bit geeky. He's not one of those long-haired indie boys who's always playing the guitar at parties. So guess what they did to him in the film? Yeah, he's a long-haired indie boy who likes playing guitars at parties. And one of the things that I really like about Toby in the book is that he's a genuinely nice guy, and so it feels like a sacrifice when Bianca gives him up for Wesley, who she's not even sure likes her back. In the film, they make Toby this fucking soft boy who believes in the concept of the D.U.F.F. Okay, and not only that, he uses Bianca at the end of the film to try and get closer to her friends. So they make Toby into a dick. Once again, it's just proof that the film thinks that Bianca is ugly because, you know, in the book, she got with Toby off her own back because he was attracted to her and he did like her. And she's not the D.U.F.F. But in the film, he uses her to get to her friends because she is hideous. And this also takes away Bianca's agency, because in the book, she has the choice to stay with this nice guy who she feels like is more suited to her personally. But she chooses to pursue the relationship with Wesley because that's the guy who she feels like she's in love with. By making Toby a dick and by making him not interested in Bianca at all, it feels like Bianca doesn't have a choice. It's like, oh, well, I've got to go and get with Wesley because he's the only guy who's ever going to love me, who's ever going to see past my ugly, freakish countenance. In conclusion, okay, I'm not saying that I hate this film. I do think there are a lot of positives. I like the chemistry between the two leads. I think there are some genuinely funny scenes. I think it works perfectly fine as a teen comedy romance thing. But I feel like it could have done all that on its own and not used the concept of this book that did so much more. The Hollywood fucking execs, yeah, the fucking fascists who made this movie did a far, far shallower job than the 17-year-old author who wrote the original book. Considering how shallow everybody says teenage girls are, I think that that's really saying something. Let's let the teenage girls make the movies. Put the teenage girls in charge. Let's do it.